The crowd anticipating something special once again. Oh, it's a tough act to follow, but he's done it again.
Excellence can be created, it can be replicated, it can be taught.
The Inner Game Podcast, Season 2.
Boom! So, welcome onto the Inner Game Podcast. We have Will Feneley, who is a 2022 Winter Skiing Olympian. Will was also one of the youngest, if not the youngest, British representative in the Junior World Championships back in 2014 as a 14-year-old competing against people 6 years older than him. He's finished 11th in the World Cup. He's had multiple Europa Cup podiums along the way. So today we've got the pleasure of speaking to somebody who's at the beginning almost of his career, but somebody who's achieved so much already. And I'm really intrigued to get inside the mind of Will and learn more about this sport and the mental challenges of being able to do the things that you do in your sport. So thank you very much for coming on, Will.
No, thank you for inviting me on.
So obviously Britain, in recent years, we've probably had an upsurge, but historically, Britain isn't renowned for the winter sports, the skiing, snowboarding, those types of events. How did you get into it then?
Well, it's so I did sort of family holiday type stuff when I was young. So when I was 6 years old, I traveled to Canada for a family holiday, just skiing. And I guess my parents thought I did pretty well in it. And my brother too. My brother is a skier as well. And when we came back to Norfolk, where I live, we had these dry slopes in the UK. So they're plastic slopes. And yeah, so I would go up there every week and the same with my brother. And it kind of started from there. And it's not really an ideal training situation. It's nothing like snow, but you can get a pair of skis on and do what you want to train what you want to train. So yeah, started there and got picked up into a race academy when I think I must have been 7 or 8. So it's only been a couple of years actually skiing. And then that's an open academy, anyone can go, but they came to where I was skiing and sort of run a camp, and they said, oh, you should come over and train with us in France. And so I would do that for quite 5 years, I think I did, going over in the winter as from the ages of sort of 9 to 14.
Gosh.
And so that was the sort of racing element, and I did that. And during that time, I got really invested in sort of freestyle and sort of doing jumps, and that was where I really sort of enjoyed skiing, not so much the racing. And so I'd done during that time, on the later years, sort of doing some freestyle camps and things. And one person at one point said, you should try Moguls, because it's sort of a mix of the two. And I thought, well, I don't really know. I've already switched to freestyle, but okay, I'll give it a go. And a year later, I was doing the World Junior Championships. So a very quick progression from the alpine and freestyle into the sport I do now, which is Moguls. And yeah, for 6 years, 7 years now, I've been full-time doing Moguls.
And so you've mentioned there how you've transitioned from that one style to this Mogul style. Can you walk us through and describe what this looks and feels like to actually take part in this event?
in Moguls.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the amalgamation of all the different, well, quite a few of the different disciplines that are held at high levels. So we have sort of alpine racing, which is you are just timed, and whoever's the fastest wins. You have freestyle, which is it's just a judged thing. How hard your tricks are goes into it, but also how they look, the style that you give. And then moguls is it's a bit of the two. So we're timed, but it's doesn't matter if you're the fastest down. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win, because that's 20% of our score. But then the 20% goes into, we have two jumps, so 10% for each, and how hard your jump is, the difficulty of it, plus or multiplied by the scores that the judges give you for how it looks, which will include your takeoff, how you are in the air, your landing, etc. And that adds up to 20% as well. So the remaining 60% is the moguls element, the bits in the middle of the jumps. So that's your style within the moguls, how aggressive you are. They judge it on how you can carve a ski. So if you can put it onto an edge and turn it a lot better than others, you're going to get more points, and how still your upper body is. So there's lots of factors that go into the overall score of our sport. I guess at the end of the day, it's sort of an overall impression, because you need a bit of everything. Admittedly, the 60% is more important, but if you don't have the 20%, other people will beat you, because it's out of 100, obviously. So, you can get up to 60 on just turns, but if you have 0 on everything else, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So you really need a bit of everything.
Yeah. And when I've watched you guys doing what you do, it looks pretty scary at times. So how much of a challenge is that when you're learning these new skills, new techniques? Because I'd imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're obviously competing against other people. So in your mind, you're having to think, like, what is my level of score going to be at versus theirs? What tricks and skills can I show that's going to get me the highest points? And I'd imagine that each year, are you trying to like evolve on your repertoire of what you can do? And obviously, in doing that, I'd imagine you're really pushing the boundaries of like your capabilities to keep mastering these harder skills. How much of a challenge is that?
So it's an interesting one for our sport currently, because a lot of the guys have actually maxed out on what is legal within our sport. So what we say, double falls, 1080s, these are sort of the top tricks. You can go to triple fall, so 3 twists and a backflip, and a 1440 off axis. So your feet are going around the side, but you're upside down and you're doing 4 twists in that. That is sort of the limit to our sport at the minute. So they sort of brought in this idea of putting grabs in, so you're grabbing the ski during it, and that increases the difficulty as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where our sport is going, and what we're sort of now training for the coming years. For me, from a freestyle point of view, that's quite nice, because that's part of freestyle. Like freestyle skiing, everyone, you have to grab. If you don't grab, you have no style. So it's really bringing a bit more of the freestyle element into moguls, which is nice for me, because I've grown up doing freestyle.
Yeah.
And then from the backflip with the twist point of view, I mean, really, there is so far you can go on the jumps that we have. They're not huge jumps. So, and you take off, you have a second and a half in the air and you land. There's not the time to be doing these crazy spins, because we're capped to 1 flip. You can't do a double. But I grew up doing gymnastics. That's kind of my main background for my aerial awareness. And so these sorts of spins, they're sort of my bread and butter. I way prefer that to the grabbing stuff. On a bit of an interesting one, because I had to learn to spin the other way, which
Right.
it's a bit funky, because I did gymnastics. I must have been, I don't know, 5 or something, learning how to do a round off, like a cartwheel. And the way I did it meant that I had to spin right in gymnastics.
Yeah.
So I learned to spin right first in gymnastics, but on skis, when you spin upright, I was spinning left, and that is my natural way to spin, is to spin left.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get this one fundamental trick right, spinning left. So the coach that I had at the time said, well, let's try work on it to the right, because I was doing the other trick to the right, which is very similar. And it kind of went from there. So I ended up, now when I do moguls, I spin unnaturally on both
Really?
jumps. Yeah, yeah. But it works. I mean, I say unnaturally, it's the way I wouldn't choose to do it, but it's natural to me now because I've trained it. But it just makes things slightly more difficult because when you're changing positions, it's not what you've grown up doing. When you spin the other way, it's uncomfortable in a way to change things up. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. But when we come to how we actually get to the point where we can do it on snow and replicate it in competition, where we train on the trampoline first, then we do skiing into water. So we sort of take off and land in water, and that's better because you've got the feeling of the skis and the boots and landing and taking off, the whole feeling of being on snow, but it's safer. Although it still hurts if you land on your face, obviously. And then from there you take it onto snow and hopefully replicate what you've done through that process.
Yeah. You mentioned there about obviously how you had to retrain that pattern that you'd learned in gymnastics. In fact, I just would like to touch on that a little bit. So one of the things that in order to learn any skill, the mind has to develop a pattern for how to do something, and that's essentially what is called a schema, which is essentially a subconscious movie of how exactly you perform that skill through your own eyes when you're doing it. And the younger that somebody learns a skill, the more that skill gets ingrained, hardwired into their subconscious. So it then becomes, as they get older, easier and easier to do because they learned it at such a young age. And the real cutoff to if you learn any skills to a high level before the age of 7, that massively sets you apart from people who learn skills in any sport after that. And so it was just making me think there how that probably took quite a bit of effort. If you started doing gymnastics, did you say it was around 5?
Yeah, I probably started training gymnastics when I was 6, 7. I was doing like bouncing on the trampoline and stuff when I was 5, maybe.
So if you'd mastered that way of spinning, was it the right hand spinning to the right that you said?
Spinning to the right without skis on. Yeah.
So you learned it at such a young age to do it that way. I can imagine that it would have taken you quite a bit of effort to then undo what you did.
Yeah, exactly. It did take a long time, and it was different for different tricks as well. Like I'd mastered it to the right in my backflip, but upright, if I'm spinning upright and I'm not flipping to the left, I'd mastered it. So I was trying to sort of work out how to get across on one side but still stay the same on another. Like it's nice that the tricks are kind of similar because I got it right for doing backflips to the right. I could sort of just slowly move the skis down until I was off axis, if that makes sense. And so I sort of used a lot of what I had learned from a young age to be able to get over to this new trick and sort of change the direction that I was doing it in. So
do you still think that ultimately those gymnastic fundamentals that you learned, do you still think that in the end that's been a positive thing to help you with the mogul skiing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just on a ground level, just aerial awareness in general has been a massive help for me. It just massively helps with learning new stuff, learning new tricks as well, being confident in the air, knowing where you are in the air, on a safety level too, because a big part of our sport is injury. It's quite common, and some of that's down to just of lack of knowing how your body, where it is, what's going on, how to recover from certain positions. And growing up in a gymnastics background, you sort of learn the skill of where you are at a very young age, and I think that's benefited me in my sport directly.
Yeah. Can some of the things that happens, one of the things that happens with a couple of athletes who I've worked with who I'm thinking of, where they've got what sometimes they call it the yips, where they get like a block of being able to perform a skill. Either it's a new skill that they're learning that they can't quite get the feel of it. They can't quite finish off that movie inside the mind of how they need to do that skill. Or sometimes they learn it and then something happens, an accident, and then they get, as I say, the mind puts like the brakes on and goes, stop doing that because you could get hurt. Have you ever been in a position where either one of those two things has happened, where you couldn't quite learn a skill because there was a bit of a block, or you'd learnt one and then something happened and then it kind of held you back in some way?
Absolutely. The biggest one for me was learning to do backflips on snow, on skis. And I could not get over my mind, like gymnastics, when you do a backflip, you take off and then you travel backwards, you travel this way. But on skis, you're doing a backflip, but you're traveling forwards. And I could not get out of my mind. I don't know, I was 10 or 11, that how am I going to travel forwards if I'm jumping backwards? Like, it's silly now because it's like obvious you've got forward momentum, but at the time I was like, I just can't commit to jumping backwards and going forwards. And it took me a really long time to sort of get over that fear. And I did learn to do backflips on snow in a really weird way. It was sort of, they weren't correct. And then because of that not being correct, I landed on my face twice. And at that point I was like, right, I will not do backflips anymore. I'll just do all the forward rotations. I'll do front flips and things, which is terrible in moguls because no one does that. It's just making your life so much more difficult.
Right.
And so I got to 15, and I remember it quite vividly. I had to travel to Australia to train, and it was in the first time I'd met. I didn't know anyone over there apart from the family I was staying with, and it was a completely new training program. I didn't know any of the kids, the coaches, and within the first sort of couple of weeks, it was sort of a sit down. They obviously knew my background and knew that I was capable in the air, and my coach sort of just said, "So you're going to do a backflip today, or you won't do it for the camp." And I was over there for 2 months, so I sort of sat down for a bit, like, what do I do? What do I do? And went, and after some time, got up, counted down from 3, went and over rotated it. Did the complete opposite of what I've been doing a few years ago, and which was fine because I was like, oh, it is, no, I can get over and I can rotate backwards while traveling forwards. And it wasn't long after that where I was just landing them every time. And then the same year I was doing sort of the biggest backflips in like the off piste, like on these huge jumps, and the tiniest ones on just little lips, and sort of just doing it in every place I could because I loved it so much. And it was such a contrast in my mind of, oh, actually this is completely possible. And it was just that blocker that was holding me back.
Yeah. How do you think you were able to change that inside your mind? If you could remember back to there, what do you think was the crucial thing that clicked, that enabled you to get to the point, most probably, is just to actually do it more than anything? How do you think, what was it that changed internally, do you think, for you?
I think there's a couple of factors. I think one of the things that I'd done was I was practicing doing backflips forwards on like the trampoline into a foam pit. And so just getting that feeling of moving forwards while doing it, and sort of just like going through that in my mind of that's how it feels, that's going to be, and you really, it's so different because you don't need to give that forward momentum. On skis, you're already traveling forwards, so it's not the same, but it allowed me to sort of feel that in my mind a little bit more of, okay, that's what that feels like. And then it was just sort of a thing of just sort of sitting there and remembering what that feels like, and remembering in my mind, okay, so this is what's going to happen. I'm going to take off, and that's going to feel like that in the air. And it made a lot more sense to me physically once I process that internally.
Yeah, that makes sense. So whilst we're talking about this, in order to do what you do and to get to the level that you've got to so far, how much of what you are doing is physical and how much is mental? I always ask the same question. How, as a percentage, if you could put it down to percentage, to perform to an Olympic level and get to that level, how much of it is based on the physical work that you're doing, obviously, with practicing the moves, the strengthening and conditioning, the other things that you're doing, and how much of it is the mental side of it, being able to, handle the fact that you are doing something that can be dangerous, that is obviously not a natural thing for a human to do, to be spinning around at all these speeds. What's your opinion on that, Will?
Yeah, I think it's it is obviously quite a lot of physical stuff, putting in the hours, doing the training, getting the reinforcement of the movements, but that becomes mental then, because that's subconscious understanding of what to do when, because a lot of our sport is quick reactions, and you don't have the time to process it and go, okay, this is what I learned in training, I'm doing this. It needs to be inside, and you need to be able to react to certain situations without thinking about them. I've had a time where I could have really, really hurt myself, but my mind saved me. I was coming into the bottom air. It was World Champs 2019, and coming into bottom air, completely out of control. Couldn't even avoid the jump because I was so out of control. Take off, hoping to do just a straight air, not go upside down, but my feet scooped up, and I'm sort of waving like this, not flipping, but my head's going underneath, and I was going to land on my head.
Gosh.
But I didn't think about it, but I tucked in. It just happened because my natural instinct of what my body was feeling was to tuck over, and I landed on my feet. Admittedly, I then did 3 forward rolls because I landed on a mogul and my skis blasted off, and but I was completely fine. I competed the next day, and I think some of that completely is down to how good this stuff is ingrained in you mentally, how well your reflexes are. And the other part is being able to handle the pressure, the constant pressure that you're putting yourself under. I mean, it's internal, all that stuff. I felt it a lot this year, coming into the Olympics, and it was, our qualification is over 2 years, so you have to do, and it's cumulative. So by the end of last year, I was ranked 29, and you needed to be top 29 to go to the Olympics. And so my main goal was set out this year was just keep doing what I'm doing, just try and stay in that top 29. And I was putting so much pressure on myself, and nights where I sort of wake up and go, I can't do it. I can't, way before I'm even competing, like in the middle of summer, just thinking about what will be, and am I going to make it? Is it going to happen? And it gets sort of, as I was going through the season, I was dropping 32, 33, 37, 38. And it was the night before the last competition where I sat down with my teammate and I was like, honestly, this is not working for me. I'm not gonna, I'm not even thinking about the Olympics anymore. I've only got one more competition to qualify, but it's whatever it is, they're putting way too much pressure on it. I'm not skiing like I want to ski. And the next day, the minute I had done that, I did my best result of the year and bumped myself back up into the top 29 on the one day. And that's down to the pressure I was putting on myself, and the ability to control that and look at it from a different perspective. And that doesn't just apply on my Olympic year, that's on every single competition. So it's something that I've had a big learning curve this year and will put into coming years. So to answer your question, I would have said last year, like 70-80% physical, 20% mental. But after this season, it's actually, I didn't give mental enough credit. It really does affect me, and I think pretty much it will affect most people. And so it's almost 50-50 in my eyes.
And it's, I think it is also different for different sports as well. And I get different answers to that each time. Some people have said 80-20, 80 mental, 20% physical, which is a huge shift, a huge emphasis. It's a big call to say that. And which is one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, working with athletes, helping with the mental side of what they're doing, because often this is the one thing that the athletes aren't doing. You know, if the way I look at it, if you was to break down what are the key elements to being an elite sports person, obviously you've got to be able to master the technical elements of what you're doing. In certain sports, there's a tactical elements to it. Then you've got the strengthening and conditioning. Then you've got like nutrition. Then you've got your recovery and whatever those other pieces that make up that pie, if that makes sense. And everybody's giving time to all those areas. But then if you used to ask them, right, how much time are you giving to the mental? And it would be so small. But yeah, every athlete that's come on here has emphasized how important the mental side of it is. And as you're saying there, Will, like the vast majority of the time, it's an athlete's own internal pressure that they are putting on themselves. It's how they are talking to themselves about how they're performing. It's how they are thinking about their next competition. And often athletes get stuck in this trap, this loop of the what ifs. What if I don't make it? What if I get this wrong? What if I don't make the cut? What if I get released? What if I miss this? What if I can't do that? What if I'm not good enough? And as soon as the mind goes into thinking like that, it starts to generate a state of mind. And it almost seems there when as you were gradually dropping out of that top 29, that it was almost causing you, from what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that you was thinking about it more, you're just having more thoughts about not quite making it, which was then putting you into a weaker state of mind, a state of doubt, if you like. And you can never step out onto that slope and perform at your best if you've got doubts, because there's no place for doubts inside of your mind when you're spinning around and doing what you're doing, is there? And if you when an athlete kind of gets pulled into that state, the analogy that I use is that it's like driving a car and having your foot full down on the accelerator, but your handbrake on ever so slightly, just holding you back a bit. And it seems that when you got to that last race, you just kind of thought, screw it. And you just let go of the expectation that you're putting on yourself. And with that came the freedom to just go and express yourself. Is that how it kind of felt for you?
Absolutely. I was sort of this massive weight taken off. That handbrake is off. And I was just able to go out and focus on the things I needed to focus on. I wasn't standing at the top like, right, I need to get this right now, which I would have been doing. You know, it was one competition and it was hit or miss. Or I could have been at the top there going, okay, I need these people not to do well, and I need to get this score, and based on other years, I need to be top this, whatever, and look at it all like that. But none of that is going to help my performance. And so when I had all that out of the way, like none of this actually matters. I'm skiing in America, and I'm able to, I'm allowed to do this. This is what I'm doing for my life, and how great is that? And when you look at it from that perspective and think, actually, I'm gonna go out there and ski for fun and focus on the things that I can control, and I put down a good run because of that, and that comes down to how my mental state had changed over that. I mean, one night is quick to change it, but it's what happened for me, and it had been coming to that point for a while. I've been thinking it a bit, and then on that last night, I was like, well, I'll either make it or I won't, but let's give myself the best chance.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I like how you said that. How you mentioned there, how it might sound. I can't remember how you exactly worded it, but you mentioned how it changed in one night, and for some people that might sound like, well, in one night, but I know that is entirely possible. It's entirely possible to change your state of mind. And as you said there, you're giving away clues as to how your own mind did it. You was able to shift and look at yourself from a different perspective. And as soon as doubt comes in, it turns on the freeze, fight, or flight mechanism in the mind. It turns on fear, essentially. And no athlete will ever perform to their truest level of potential based on what their ability is at that time, if the deeper reservoirs of the mind have been turned on, that amygdala, the hippocampus, when the emotional centers get triggered, and they get triggered, they can only get triggered through two ways: by repeating thoughts over and over that you just get locked into, or actually imagining the things going wrong. So the feeling that we feel, whether it's as an athlete or just every average Joe person, the two things that control the feeling is the thoughts and is the images. And if the thoughts that somebody's thinking are doubtful ones, if somebody's imagining their event going wrong, then those two things are firing up this state of doubt, this state of anxiety. And thankfully, you at that time was able to break out of that state by shifting your perspective, reframing what you was doing. And I'd imagine you was thinking something completely different, even maybe nothing at all in the build up to that once you was able to do it. Did you notice how once you'd got to that point where you'd said, this is it, I'm just going for it, and you said whatever you said to yourself in those moments after it, and the hours leading up to the event, can you remember back to how your internal thought processes was around that time? Was you thinking differently, or had you been able to pretty much just turn it off?
Yeah, well, I got to the point. So that night where I was sort of trying to think through all the stuff and how I'm going to change my mindset and all of that, I was pretty miserable. I was sort of thinking like, is this working? What is the point? I'm not getting anywhere. All these sort of really, they're not helpful thoughts at all. And to be perfectly honest, they're not true either about yourself. I tell myself a lot of the time, during that year, am I going to be able to do it? Am I good enough? I don't think so. And it's all a lie. It's all a sham. And so I was in a pretty miserable state because of all this stuff. And I just thought, why am I so miserable? And it's all because I want to make it to the Olympics, but this should be a good process. This should be a fun, exciting thing. And that's kind of what changed my mind, was just sort of like, well, I don't want to be unhappy anymore about this. So let's actually enjoy skiing, because I've done it all my whole life and I like skiing, and I don't want to be skiing miserable. So waking up the next morning, it was this shift of, I'm looking forward to the competition. I wasn't scared of the competition. So I sort of tell myself yeah, I can do it. And, I've got the back fall and the cork 7 or whatever jump I was doing, backflip on the bottom, thinking about the things that I could be doing, rather than thinking, I hope it goes right this time because I haven't got long left. So it was a big shift from what I remember. And the one thing I said to myself at the beginning of the season was, I don't want to leave it to the last competition. I don't want to put myself in that position. I did that because I wasn't sure I was capable of being able to handle that. But it's nice to know that I could, and that it was the last competition, and it really did matter. But because of the way I was able to change my mind overnight and change my mindset overnight and wake up and be in such a better place, it was fine in the end, and it all worked out how I'd hoped it had. But it is stressful to put myself in that position, and it would have been a nicer experience. I wouldn't have had to go through the downs if I had skied better at the beginning. But the reason I didn't was because of this handbrake.
Yeah, and I think what you've said there, Will, is so powerful for yourself, so powerful for anybody else in any sport. The things that you're talking about there are the same things that so many athletes are thinking about in so many different sports. And a lot of it is, it's easy to let the mind go down the negative route, because hardwired into our brains, fortunately and unfortunately, is to look for danger. It's looking for danger because it's a self-preservation. you know, habit, technique of the mind, if you like, to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
But that innate pattern of the mind, it gets confused, and it starts mixing up what danger it's looking out for, and even such as, you know, am I good enough? When you break that down, if somebody's doubting if they're good enough, it's some kind of fear that they've got, this judgment of themselves, this judgment of other people judging them. Well, am I good enough? And if somebody is questioning that, there's a difference between hoping you're going to do it and knowing, and being able to break out of those loops of thinking is very important. And I think how you were able to do it was start to focus on, why am I even doing this? And when you break it down for any athlete, all of us who started their journey in sport, it all starts out from enjoyment, doesn't it? And in trying to get to, when you get to your level, in trying to get to the top, plus you've got external factors, you know, that aren't just coming from yourself. You know, I'm sure you'll have certain targets and things that you got to hit for funding, sponsorship, all that sort of stuff. That can come in as well, I'd imagine, at time for you. And that starts to shift the mind away from the pleasurable enjoyment that you get from your sport. And then the mind starts flicking to the pain, you know, remembering the things that did go wrong, imagining the things that did could go wrong, and being able to focus your mind on this is what I love doing. I enjoy this. You know, I'm just going to go and enjoy myself. And as soon as the mind, subconscious mind, can be convinced of that this is a pleasurable thing, that's how you can let go. But as soon as somebody starts having the doubts, what that is doing is telling the mind that this could be dangerous. This could be dangerous, because if you really love something, it wouldn't be dangerous. You just wouldn't do it. Just like you wouldn't keep putting your hand into a fire because you get burned. And so the mind is trying to protect ourselves and protect athletes from certain things. But the way to shift it back away from the doubt, away from the anxiety, away from the fear, is always to have big, clear images in your mind of the pleasurable reasons why you're doing it. Imagine yourself succeeding, imagining it going right, imagine you're doing something that you've never done before, remembering, you know, being much younger and having so much fun doing it. The mind needs to be funneled to that, and if it gets knocked out of that, the quicker you can get back into that, the better you're going to perform. And it just seems like you learned such a valuable lesson at exactly the right time.
Yeah, well, it was sort of like not much time left to learn it, was there? So I think it was because it was that last competition, and it was sort of, I didn't have the time to be like, I'll fix my mental state in the next one. It's sort of like it had to be done then. If not, it should have been done earlier, obviously, but there was no later to do it. Or I could have just not done it at all. But I don't know where I would be today if I hadn't changed.
Because
possibly not going to the Olympics because of it. So
because you are right there. Well, like you could have not got to that moment. You could have. I call it going to the threshold. Some people never get to the threshold, and you got to your threshold, and it forced you to go beyond and change something. And there's many people and many athletes that never take themselves to the threshold. So they stay stagnant, they stay trapped in that state, they stay trapped at that same level of performance. And you was able to get yourself and your mind to the threshold and then go beyond it. And that's what, you know, was the key breakthrough. And I was wondering how, since then, how do you think in learning what you've learned, how do you think this is going to help you going forward, prepare for future World Cups, the next Winter Olympics? How do you think this is going to help you?
Well, I think it's going to help just on a competition basis, training basis, just to be able to to know exactly when I'm feeling a certain way, and when something's building up to the threshold, to be able to capture it earlier.
Yeah.
Because I will definitely still have times where I'm starting to fall into that trap. I don't think I'm going to be able to avoid it, but to be able to learn how to stop it sooner rather than letting it get so out of control. Like the catastrophization of what I was doing, like the just saying, oh, how is it going to be, turns into, am I good enough, turns into, should I be doing this, turns into, let's just quit, that kind of stuff. um I'll hopefully be able to stop at, why am I doing this, because I love it, you
Yeah.
know, rather than, why am I doing this, oh, am I good enough, change the pathway of that question line. And
Definitely.
I think that's probably my biggest learning aspect from the last season, which I'll easily take into the next season and implement it. And that's just going to hopefully keep my mental state positive throughout. And it's not just in competition. If I'm learning a new trick and it's not going well, and I've done it for a couple of days and I'm not making progress, you fall into that trap as well. So um, from a training point of view too, it's going to be really beneficial.
Yeah. And what you said there, again, is so spot on that you've got to interrupt the pattern. I call it a pattern interrupt. If somebody's got into that loop, they can stay in it. And as I said, the more you think the thought, the more it generates the feeling. The more you generate the feeling, the more you think the thought, and then it goes. And
Yeah.
The anxiety can become crippling. But
The heart rate goes up.
yeah, but you need to remember your own words there, Will. If you ever ask that question, why am I doing this? You very quickly answered it, because I love it. And that we can use teach athletes how to use triggers like this to get them out of it. And just being able to notice, if you ever get into that kind of state with those thoughts, just being able to ask yourself the question, right, am I going back there? Am I going back to that place? And if you can ask yourself yes or no, that will be enough to help you start breaking the state, and then start asking some questions that's going to drive your state back in the other way. So, in your case, Will, as I said, just notice kind of when that pattern of thinking comes, and then if you can remember to say to yourself, why am I doing this? And then you remember all the real reasons why you're doing it. And that's enough to gradually, instead of the state driving you down, you ask the question that breaks the pattern. And then you start thinking about all the positive reasons, because of X, because of this, because this is the thing that I've loved doing since I was a kid, because I find it so enjoyable, because I find it so cool being able to do this, whatever your whys are to do it. As soon as you can cut that pattern and then send it back the other way, the freer you're going to be, faster. And I'm sure, going forward now that you've really learned something that's going to, give you that what's the word I'm looking for? Just that signal of when you're falling into an old trap.
Yeah.
So how would you prepare for learning a new kind of routine, or when you're mapping it all out from start to finish? What's that process like? How do you kind of create, well, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to do these jumps, these moves. I'm going to do it like this. What can you walk us through how you go about building that up?
Yeah, well, I sort of set out before competition, even before arriving at the course, because often they're in the same places year after year. So rough idea of what the course is like. So I sort of have like a plan of, these are the jumps I will be doing. But we get 2 training days where there's no judging, nothing. It's just go out and fill out the course, see what skills you want to be doing and where you need to improve in certain areas. So you sort of, at the end of that day or of each day of training, we sort of look through the video and see how things are looking and and make the decision of, because I have sort of two runs that I like to do. It's either back full on the top, backflip with a 360, and then either just a backflip on the bottom or a 1080. And it comes down to what year it is. So this year I did the simpler trick because I'm much more consistent, and I needed consistency. But if I'm going for my best result possible, then it comes down to doing the more difficult 1080 on the bottom. And it really comes down to how I'm feeling on each jump, because the jumps always seem different, no matter if it's in the same place as it was last year or in another course. They sort of like to change it up a bit, and you may get less time in the entrance of it, and it might be a smaller landing, steeper jump. So yeah, it comes down to the 2 days of training to work out which of the two I want to do on the bottom. And then just sort of the from a mental point of view, it's going over that in your mind and sort of visualizing what it's going to be like firstly before I do the jumps. So I've already done straight airs, maybe just tested them out. When I'm at the top and I'm looking down the course, I can see both jumps on most courses, so I can sort of visualize my run going down and think, okay, so come in like that, hit the jump this way, drop my arms, then this is how it's going to feel in the air. I often do a first person visualization mainly, but sometimes third person as well, and then also retrospectively. So once I've done the day of training, sort of visualize, and from video as well, because we sort of do minimal numbers of runs during a training day, so I can pretty much remember all the jumps I've done that day, and sort of retrospectively visualize it, and what did that feel like on that one. Okay, it feels good, it looks good on the video, let's go with that jump. And then it's just commit to it, because I had one time 2 years ago, so it wasn't qualification for Olympics or anything, it was a World Cup, one of my first ones, and I had done training 1080 on the bottom jump, pretty much all of the training. And my coach at the end said that last one you did, you can't do that, because if you do that, you're going to ruin the rest of your run. And so I had no more training runs. So I was like, what do I do? And he was like, go do the 720. And I was like, well, I crashed on the last 720 I did 2 days ago. What jump should I do? And when it came, they never gave me an answer. So I was not clued up on what I was actually going to be doing during my run at the top, which was silly, but these are things you learn from. And I came down, got a bit messy, wasn't prepared for what I was going to do on bottom air. Did like a bad backflip on the bottom air, and didn't make it. I did not a very, like, right at the back of the pack of the field. And that came down to not being prepared at the top, like ready, like actually knowing what I'm going to do. So from then on, it's like, once I've done my training, whatever the jump is that we're set on, no matter what, we do it.
Yeah.
Like, however I'm coming into bottom air, it's pretty much do it. And luckily I have the mental instinct to just do a backflip if I need to now. So I can but I don't like to think about that, because I don't want it to become a cop out.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. I don't want it to be like, oh, I could just do that then. So I always get to the top. Okay, these are the jumps I'm doing. And it's only if something goes wrong that thought of doing something else comes into my mind.
Yeah.
Which is not, I don't think about it. As I said, like earlier, when I was having that crash in 2019, my body told me to tuck over. Here it's, my body says, don't do the big dangerous trick, do a simple one, because you're going to crash otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it really comes down to the training, and then the sort of the visualization to find out what jumps I want to do, and then the commitment to that plan.
Yeah. You said so many, fascinating things there, Will, and it seems to me that the mental visualization of what you do is a big part of your routine, more so than what pretty much any other athlete who I've spoken to, who's been on the podcast anyway, who would naturally do. Most often, most athletes don't seem to be applying what you're doing, and what you're talking about here should be part of what every athlete is doing for every sport. And I think, you've given a prime example there of when you didn't get that visualization right. And all visualization is, it's a movie ahead of time. It's a memory ahead of time. So the great thing about the human brain, the human mind, is that it can do two things. It can rewind to the past and remember things, but it can also then go to the future and imagine things. And the thing about the mind is that it does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. Hence why when you go to sleep and if you have a bad dream, in that moment, it feels real. And that is what is happening when an athlete is visualizing what it is that they want to do. And a big part not a big part, but part of how I help athletes is teaching them the exact specifics to visualize. Because what people don't realize is that this visualization, there is a subconscious structure to it. So for example, a skill that you can do like that, in your mind will look one way. Okay. In fact, would you be up to doing a little thought experiment?
Sure.
Right. So, can you think of like a skill that you haven't mastered yet that you want to? Have you got one like this, or a specific like?
Yeah, something I'm working on, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's competition ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to show yourself and other people how your mind is processing those two differently. So have you got a skill that you can do, like that? Yeah. So we'll try it with your eyes open first. So if not, you may need to close your eyes to do it. But can you think of the technique that you can perform really easily? Can you get this into your mind? Yeah. And can you see an image which represents this skill that you're thinking of? Yeah. So if we can just do the next few things by rating it out of 10. Okay. So what's the size of the image like? 10 would be it's big. 1 would be it's small. So for this, the skill that you've mastered really well, what's the size of it like? 10 to 1. What score would you give it?
Like the imagery, the size of the picture, and everything.
The size of what you can see inside your mind.
Probably sort of an 8.
An 8. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me write this down here actually. So just so we can then compare. No. So size. So you gave it that 8. Okay. Right. In terms of the color of it. So when you look at it and you see the color of the skill of this technique, how colorful is it? 10 out of 10 would be it's really colorful, like really colorful. 1 would be it's like dark and gray. What would you give the color for it when you see the image?
Yeah, it's sort of around a 6 to 7, low 7.
Well,
yeah,
so
somewhere
6.5 then. So
yeah.
What about the brightness? How bright is it? 10 out of 10 would be it's really bright. 1 would be it's like dull and again grey.
Okay, so that's why. So that the brightness of this is around a 7, 6.5.
Yeah.
There's the color is just the saturation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so probably like a 7.5 for the saturation color.
Yeah.
And a 6.5 for the brightness.
Okay. Right. So what about the distance? So how close is that image in your mind? Is it close here or is it further away? So 10 would be really close to your face. 1 would be, further away from you.
10.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's many other things that we can go through there, but we'll just stick to, in fact, we'll do one more. What about the focus of it, the clarity? So 10 out of 10 would be, it's like crystal clear. 1 would be like murky, fuzzy, murky water.
Yeah, I'll go with 8. The skill itself is pretty clear.
Yeah.
The imagery around is less so.
So what about, so just focus on that skill itself.
Yeah.
The actual skill, all in.
Let's go 9.
9, yeah.
Yeah.
So can you now think of the skill that you haven't got it where you want it to be yet? You've not mastered it, yeah? Can you get this image up into your mind now?
Yeah.
Got it? So what about the size of that? So 10 out of 10 would be really big, 1 would be small.
It's around sort of a 5 to 6.
Or 5.5. Yeah. So in terms of the color or the saturation, which you called it, what's that like? 10 would be, really colorful, 1 not so colorful.
It's 6.5. It's pretty, probably the same.
Yeah. What about the brightness?
What about 5?
5. What about the distance? So 10 really close, 1 far away.
It's a bit further. So I'm going to say 6 to 5. I don't know how far 1 would be. But I'm going to go somewhere around it. It'll be in the middle.
Yeah, that's fine. So about 5.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What about the focus and clarity of the image?
Yeah, it's
10 is really clear. 1 it would be fuzzy.
like a 3 or 4. Let's go 3.5.
3.5.
It's like motion blur.
Yeah. So how I help athletes in terms of a skill that they are struggling with is altering that. So as you can see there, the skill that you've mastered, it has a different internal structure to it. Yeah. And we've identified that. So for example, the skill that you've mastered, the size of it is, you give it 8 out of 10. So it's quite big. Whereas the skill that you haven't mastered yet, it's at a 5.5. A big one, another one was distance. So when you'd learned that skill, the skill that you learned was really close to you. Yeah. And as a result of that, it was also very clear. You gave the focus of it a 9 out of 10. Yeah. Whereas the skill which you hadn't learned, the distance of it, it was further away. And it was the focus of it, it was harder for you and your subconscious mind to see. So when athletes learn a new skill, what I would then do, I'd ask you then to step into that, and then you would be able to run that movie through as exactly how to perform it. And what I teach athletes to do, there's many other structures to that as well, but I help them change those structures. And by changing those representations of the images and even sounds, and even there's certain elements to the feelings and sounds of it as well, by tweaking those elements, after you've tweaked them, you will literally be able to perform that skill better through no extra physical practice, just through altering the neurology. And one of the reasons why this works is because our whole our whole understanding of how we see the world, it's constructed through our sensory system. It's constructed through what we see, what we hear, what we're feeling, what we're tasting, and what we're smelling. Obviously, for sport context, the taste and the smell side of things very rarely has an impact. But by taking an image and altering all these fine structures to it, by taking the sound, because if I'd continued and we went through the sounds, there would have been a sound difference to the skill that you'd mastered. It would sound different. You'll know yourself when you're going down a slope. I'd imagine that when you I don't know. I'm just plucking this out of the air. This bit, but But when you've got the exact line that you want, or when you're going into a jump, it will probably sound a little bit different. It will sound a little bit smoother. The volume of it will be different. And the feelings associated to a skill that you've mastered versus the feeling to a skill that you haven't mastered, that will be different. So I help athletes change that so that the subconscious pattern that they have for that skill, they can then use that, change it, keep repeating it, keep playing that through. And also doing what you did, which I found so fascinating, because I've never heard anybody say they did this without me helping them do it, is how you look at the skill from the different positions. So you said you do it through first position, which I just want to clarify what you mean by that. Is that you mean it through your own eyes?
Through my own eyes, what I would see while I'm doing the trick. Yeah.
And then you said third position, which is, so the second position is when you look at it through the eyes of your coach or another athlete watching you. But you went to third position as if, do you look at it as if from you're above yourself, or kind of at an angle back?
Yeah, sort of like in the air with me, but next to me.
Yeah.
In a way, like around me, but in the air. Yeah.
So again, anybody listening to what Will said there, what you're doing there is very, very powerful to help you learn these skills, because the more perspectives that you get of how you perform that skill, the easier it is for the subconscious mind to go, that's how I do it. And you know, with the skills that you haven't yet learned, keep changing those positions. Go from yourself to the third person. Even imagine looking at it through the eyes of your coach, because by flicking through those different frames of perspective, the mind will learn just something ever so slightly different. And I would recommend, you know, imagine going to the second position and imagine that your coach is watching you do it. And if you flick through all three positions, and the most important one is always first position. You always want to start in the first position, then go to the second or the third, whichever you've just done there. But then you want to return back into first position, because that's how you get the feeling. Without that, without being in your own body, you can't get the feeling of how to do the skill. And sometimes that's one of the other elements which goes wrong with somebody who's learning a skill, is that they actually hadn't realized that they've come out of first position and they keep seeing themselves from some other position. And until they go back in, the skill won't lock in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with visualization, it's quite a really, particularly for my skiing, because when I'm in the UK, we don't have the mountains and the resources to be able to actually do a lot of the stuff we train. So you get quite a bit of time to put into sort of visualization techniques. And so I think it's quite beneficial whenever you've got time in an airport and you've got a long travel, or you're at home for a week and you won't be skiing during that time, whatever sport. Like, that's the best time to be doing it. I think I learned quite a while ago, I think this is correct, but by visualization, like visualizing things, you still sort of build the neural pathways to be able to actually, I think you sort of said about it, and it's, you know, I sort of held that thought as I've been doing my visualization, because I believe that it really does help learn the skill, and but also quicker, so you can pick up the stuff a lot quicker.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. And I've mentioned this a few times on this podcast, and I will say it again, there's been numerous studies done. You know, there's been one with basketballers, piano players, weight trainers. Not weight trainers, lifting weights. You know, one group, they go and lift the weight, they play the piano, they shoot the basketball hoops, and they do it however many times a week for however many minutes. The other group doesn't physically do anything. They just imagine lifting the weight. They imagine playing the piano. They imagine shooting the hoops, and they do it for the same length of time. You know, if it's 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, they do it for a month, and then they come back, and there is no difference. You're talking a 1 to 3% difference in performance, and yet one of them hasn't physically done anything.
Yeah.
And then there's this one guy who was quite groundbreaking, really. He started doing this in the 60s, early 70s, called Jose de Silva. He was the first guy, and he did this before those 3 studies that I mentioned there. He did it way before then. But what he did was then he got in his test, his investigation, he added a third group. The third group was they did both. They physically did the thing and they mentally did it. And then that third group then went way above them. So when you add both in, you will massively accelerate your performance. There's no doubt, absolutely no doubt about that. It'd be interesting to know if other mogul skiers place the same emphasis on it as you. Do you have any idea if your other people that you compete against or from your own country, do they take it seriously as what you do?
Yeah, I think from I can't speak for the other nations that much. I sort of know the Australians pretty well from training over them, and I know that they invest a lot of time into sort of sports psychology. And the French have their sports psychology coach come around with them, so I'm sure they're doing quite a lot of this as well. But yeah, from my own team, we all sort of have our own different things that we like to do, but it all comes down to sort of the same idea.
Yeah, nice. That's amazing. Last few questions for you, Will.
Yep.
I believe that every athlete who gets to the levels that you're getting to, I believe they have a superpowers. You know, there's something that somebody does, and this is in all walks of life. Everybody has something that they're really good at. But in your sport, what would be a superpower that you have? This one thing that you have that really kind of has either helped you get to where you got to, or is helping you. And this could be a technical thing. It could be like a skill that you can perform really easily. That really helps you score well and perform well, or it could be a mental thing, or it could be your ability to visualize. What would be your superpower for you, Will?
I'd say it's my ability to take risks. I'm gonna put it like that. Whether it be I'm doing a new trick that maybe I'm not super prepared for, but I'm gonna do it anyway because it's fun. I sort of I had a couple of times, like, we're not allowed to do doubles. And the trick that I was visualizing before that I've not got very well, the one that I was scoring sort of 3-5 in the thought experiment. That trick, I did one run in training where I was like, I'm just going to push myself because why not? And I'll take this risk, and if it pays off, then I get the fulfillment from that. So I sort of didn't tell my coach about it, but I went to the top, did a full run, which I hadn't done on that course. Double full on the top, double back on the bottom, landed it great. And I was like, I just love that I can do that. And I think I don't like to sort of big myself up or anything like that, but I like that I'm able to sort of put myself in positions and carry them out. And that goes for when I was 15, I had to go to Australia by myself without the family and go and join a team that I didn't know, and taking that risk. And I don't know, maybe it's luck or maybe it's opportunity finding, but it's sort of a skill that I would class it as a superpower.
Yeah, I certainly would do as well, and I think it's an important skill. Too many people in all walks of life, they don't take enough risks. We have to take risks to a certain degree, and obviously with what you're doing, there is a balancing of it. You can't just go and start doing what you're doing without having built up the physical ability to do it. But to get to that point, then it becomes mental, because some people would just put the brakes on. That's me. And if in sport, it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. People are always going to be pushing the boundaries, and especially in your sport, where people will be trying slightly more complex routines, stringing harder elements together. And if you don't have that ability to keep pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, you'd get left behind, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely.
how does the things that you've achieved in your career in sports so far, how does it help you outside of it, or does it? You know, are the things that you can take from you traveling around the world, you going doing all these things that help you just as everyday normal Will, who's not spinning around backwards in the air.
Yeah, well, I'm studying for a maths degree at the minute. So I've been doing that for 4 years now, and I've probably got another 2. So sort of the being able to manage the stress of that as well. So like stuff that I learned from skiing, that's able to help me with my and succeeding in my maths degree as well. Also, like another maybe slightly different aspect is, so now that I've been back in the UK for a little while now. We sort of have a quite a big break of training, and I sort of spent that time going back to the ski club where I learned to ski. And I think one of the best things I can take away from my career is being able to help others and put it into those guys as well. So I love going back there, and I go training. I'll probably go and do an alpine race in a week's time.
Awesome.
Because I just think it's such a good step to take what I've achieved back to where I grew up doing it, and hopefully put it on to someone else. So I think that's a really important part of what I've learned, and to put that back into the younger guys.
Yeah, and I can only thank you for having that attitude. And not all athletes do. Many do, but not all of them do. And sport. The reason why I've been involved in sport for so long is because it helped change my life. It gave me a life as a kid. It gave me confidence. It gave me motivation. It gave me direction. It gave me all of so many different things that evolved me and shaped me as a person that I would not be if I didn't find sport. And there's far too many people on this planet right now who are lost, who haven't got direction in life, and sport helps give you direction. It helps give us goals. It gives us something to get up for. It gives us something to motivate us to do. It challenges us. And I'm so pleased that you feel that the pull to do that yourself, Will, and give back to the sport, to give back to the slope, to give back to your coaches and help them, and inspire somebody to get to your level and achieve what you've done and beyond. Who knows? Because sometimes we can become limited by what we have or have not seen. Having and one thing about our country is that we don't have like a list of people that have gone and succeeded in your sport. So having young kids seeing somebody like you on TV, then seeing them in person, because I want to do that, and I think that's so powerful, and great that you're doing that, Will.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it will make an impact. I think it has already. I went the week after I was at the Olympics. The next week I was at home, but at the ski club, going back to the junior club and running sessions with each different level that they have there. And it was really fulfilling for me, and I think great for them as well. And I think, yeah, you got to. I love skiing and a whole lot, and a part of why I ski is to push the sport to new places. And there's only so long I can do that. So you've got to help the others, the younger ones who are coming through, and hope that they can then push it beyond what you could. So.
Yeah, definitely. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to an up and coming athlete, or even an up and coming skier? Either. What advice would you give them based on what you've learned so far in your relatively short career up to this point?
Yeah, well, number one, biggest thing ever, enjoy it. That is the most important thing. If you're not enjoying it, either you're doing that to yourself negatively, or the sport isn't for you. So make sure you're doing a sport that you're enjoying. Number two is sort of like keep motivated at it. So when things it took me a long time to get up to here. I sort of dropped up and down, and just because you're dropping down at one point doesn't mean that you're going to continue dropping down. You can sort of use that to change that around and go back up. So yeah, the enjoy it, motivated, and third one is just take every chance you can. Like I was saying, I like take the risk, but if you're offered up a place in France to do something, well, then go for it. As long as you can, as it's really what you want to do, then take every option you have, because it leads to it will lead to something that you didn't know you could do. So I went to America to do freestyle. I met a family there. They were from Australia. That gave me my door into the Australian team, which gave me my door to doing the North American tour, which gave the door to being noticed by the GB team, which opened the door to getting to the Olympics. So it starts, the pathways are never linear, and you just take up any opportunity, because you never know where it will take you.
3 amazing piece of advice there, Will. Thank you for that.
All good.
My last question is, what's your definition or meaning of sporting excellence, or achieving sporting excellence?
I think for me personally, it's to push myself to that threshold that we're at, that I'm talking about, is to push myself to that threshold and continually barge through it, whether that be mentally or physically. If I get to the point where I'm at that threshold and I get stuck there, that's probably my excellence there, because I know that I can push through it in other situations. So that's my definition of sporting excellence, is being able to break down these thresholds.
I absolutely love that, Will. I really do, because I'm such a firm believer in that line of ceiling of possibility. It's almost infinite in my mind. The barriers that I created, vast majority of the time, they're self-imposed. People put their limitations on themselves. Sometimes other people are putting limitations on them, but it's up to us to break outside of it. It's up to us to, like you said about yourself, to take the risks. If you don't take the risk, you'll never ever know what you're capable of. And the only way of doing that is getting out of your comfort zone, stretching yourself. And I thought that was really great what you said about how, with your own career, how it's gone up, it's gone down, and if somebody thinks that when they're on the way down that they're going to stay there, it isn't. As long as you're going to persist, sometimes it might mean that you have to change direction in a slightly different way, do something different, and then that's the catalyst to get it going back up again. But I absolutely loved your definition there, because it's certainly something that I'm aligned with. That our potential is very close to limitless. It's and it's up to us as individuals to break down our own limits. And if you can, like when you're in your situation, Will, to prove to people that these boundaries are here to be broken. Look at me. I'm here trying to break down my boundaries. I'm trying to stretch what I'm doing more and more and more. And there's no reason why you can't do it either. So what a great way to finish the podcast. And on that note, Will, I just want to say thank you for coming on and giving up your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've really enjoyed learning more about your sport and the mentality and the physicality of doing what you do. And I wish you all the success in the future. And thank you again for coming on and giving up your time.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting chat. I love being on. Thanks, Rob.
The Inner Game Podcast. Brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now.